All right, hello. Welcome to yesterlore. Put something up there real quick. All right, welcome to yesterlore. I should say welcome back to yesterlore. This is part 2 of the Frank's casket that we are looking at today. So, last time we looked at the front of the Frank's casket and the back of the Frank's casket. Today we're going to look at the left and right sides and the lid. But first I want to give a bit of an update and then go over the background of this casket if you missed the first session. So, as you might have noticed today, we're streaming on Saturday. We're streaming on Sunday. Usually we stream on Saturday. And that will be the case next week. We're going to be back to the normal schedule next week. So we haven't moved to Sunday indefinitely. It's just this week. And next week is going to be a conlang stream. I'm going to be returning to the conlang we were working on last conlang stream, which was a few weeks ago now. We're going to be returning to it. And the following week, we will be doing some hieroglyphs, and I will be ready next Saturday with the announcement of what we will be reading in terms of the hieroglyphs. More Egyptian stuff. But for now, we're going to be finishing the Frank's casket this week. It may not take the full hour and a half session, actually, to finish it. In fact, I suspect it will not. But next week we will do conlang for the whole session, and the week after we will do some ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic inscription reading for probably also the whole session, but we will see about that. So, any other updates? So I've announced it for the last few times, but I have a Patreon now. You can find linked everywhere. I also have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you just want to do a one-time thing. And you could just send a donation there if you want. Or you can now do commissions. I've mentioned commissions before, but I've actually expanded my commissions page a bit. So this is my commissions page, and I'm actually at the bottom because Buy Me a Coffee likes to order them in a weird way. I think it was like highest price to lowest price with commissions. I'm going lowest to highest right now. So you can commission poetry if you would like. So you could do an Old English mini poem, an Old Icelandic mini poem, a more substantial poem, longer poem, and then that could be an Old Icelandic or Old English. And then you can also commission an epic poem in any of these old Germanic languages. And the pricing is pay what you want, I think, for most of these as well. These are just sort of like the suggested prices for these. And then there are some add-ons that you can get for these as well. I'll look at the Old English mini poems just so you can see the add-ons. So you could add on a manuscript version, which will be basically a PDF of what the poem might look like, not in sort of lines, but on a manuscript. And you can also get a runic version. And both of these would come in like a PDF format. And each of these will be both typed and handwritten. So like with whatever Unicode and font is available to me, it will be on the PDF, and I will also handwrite it as well on paper and scan it, and that will also be on the PDF. So those are the add-ons. And all I ask is that you provide what you'd like it to be about, what you're going to use the poem for, and an email address that I can send you the final product. So that is the idea. And that's how it works with all of them. All of these have those same add-ons as well. Price ranges depending on how long it is, how much work it's going to be for me, and there's sort of like a expected time delivery. And there's only one slot for these because I can really only do one of these at a time, but there are more slots for the shorter poems. So those are also available now that you can book them. And I get notifications from the app, so I'll see them immediately as soon as I'm able to be in my phone, so that I can plan getting them back to you as soon as possible. But I'm very excited about this. So yeah, if you would like some ancient Germanic poetry coming your way, then that is now available to you. All right, so let's return now to the Frank's casket. So this is just the front of the Frank's casket. We read this last time we were looking at this Frank's casket. And the front, we learned, was a riddle about the whale, and I guess the whalebone situation, which is useful because that's what this is made of. This chest is made of whalebone. It's dated to like the early 8th century, so early 700s in probably Northumbria. And it is called the Frank's casket because it was in the collection of a 19th century collector, Sir Augustus Wollaston Franks. I think that was his name. Sir Augustus Wollaston Franks. So it's called the Frank's casket because it was in the Franks collection. Not the Franks as in the Germanic peoples that then went into conquer what is now, and give their name to what is now France. Different Franks. This is a guy named Franks. He had an S at the end of his name. It is now in the British Museum. So that's where we are seeing this here. So we saw that the front was the riddle about the material, that this chest is made of. It is a whale's bones, not to be confused with whalebone, i.e. baleen, just whale's bone. And what's depicted is the three magi as showing up to baby Jesus' birth. There's Virgin Mary and Jesus. And then on this side, we see someone who's probably Wayland the Smith. It's depicting one of his stories that we know from the Norse sources. So that tells that at least there was a version circulating in early England that was pretty similar. Because there are some... If we're identifying the people correctly, this is pretty similar to an event that happens in Valundarkvida, which is recorded much later in Norse sources. So some early version of that was also probably circulating amongst the English at that time. And this figure here might be Wayland, or it might be his brother Egil, or Egil in Old Norse. But it might be him hunting, or it might be Wayland hunting these birds. For a sort of feather wings that he's going to make in a certain point in the story. So that was the front. The rear we saw was the first Roman-Jewish war in 70 AD, and it was Emperor Titus, sacking Jerusalem. And we saw the temple. The first Jewish-Roman war, that's what it's called. Around 70 AD. So that's what we saw in the back. And now we are going to go ahead and move to the left panel. Now this left panel is pretty fun because what we see here are, we see like guys with spears on either side. It looks like we're in like a forest because there's lots of sort of tree motifs. And we see it looks like we have two wolves, but we see a she-wolf. I think this is the she-wolf again. And we see two kids. And this might make you think of a certain Roman origin story. And if so, that you would be correct, because we are going to go ahead and read the inscription. And you will recognize who these people are. So, it says, Rom Valus and Reum Valus. Okay, so Rom Valus and Reum Valus. Those are apparently early Old English names for Romulus and Remus, the mythological progenitors of Rome. Rom Valus and Reum Valus. And we see again that EU here, this urus, ur rune combo for EU, that later is usually written EO. And then we have this T here. I'm going to start from there. Tweyen. So this, we have T, W, and then we have this edel rune. It's usually called edel later. But it's from the Proto-Germanic or the earlier runic inscriptions where we see it representing a long O. But Old English only uses it and does not use it consistently. Often they'll just use an E for this sound, but sometimes they'll use this O to represent a long O that has become fronted. Now in standard West Saxon at a later time, this is actually pronounced a long A, and that's the name of the rune is edel for that reason. But at an earlier time, and in some dialects that lasted a little bit longer, this was an sound. So it's an A, but with rounding of the lips, because it started as O, but then it was pushed further forward in the mouth to become Tweyen. And so when they're representing it like that, it seems to be showing that they're still pronouncing it that way. Although I'm not so certain that they were still pronouncing it that way, just because sometimes this same thing is just written with a normal E. So what I think might be happening is that it's pronounced A at this point, but maybe they're aware that some other people pronounce it and so they're representing when they know that other people do it, because there's another word here that's usually going to be pronounced with that same vowel, but is just written with an E. The other possibility is that this is like an etymological spelling. So they're spelling it the way that it used to be pronounced because they were taught, like whoever taught them to spell was in turn taught to spell, and it, going back far enough, it was someone who did pronounce it differently. Could be a mix of both. Like they knew some people who learned it that way, other people did not pronounce it that way. But we do know that eventually this was just pronounced A pretty much everywhere in English. At least in the Old English manuscripts that we have. So, but we have Tweyen, and this word means two. It's just the number 2, Tweyen. It's a lot longer than we're probably used to hearing the word two. There are 3 words for two in Old English, depending on the gender of what you're counting. So, if it was neuter gender, it was tu. If it was feminine, it was toi. And if it was masculine, it was tweyen. But over time, making the gender distinction in the number 2 kind of like went by the wayside, and there were already certain situations where, regardless of the gender you were counting, you used toi, which makes sense. Toi was like the direct descendant of the Proto-Germanic word for two, usually. So, and it's the one that survives to be the word two. That's why we spell it T-W-O, because that long A became O, but there was a W there, and we kept the W there. But yeah, Tweyen, it does survive in sort of archaic twain. If you hear something about twain, cutting things in twain, that's Tweyen, surviving into early modern English. So yeah, so we have Romulus and Remus, Tweyen, and then we have to turn our heads a little bit. We're tilting 90 degrees. I'm probably tilting the wrong way for you. You'll be tilting that way. And it says, it's very damaged here, but we can tell this is the bottom of a G, a Yevu rune. And this is Yibrodor. Yibrodor just means brothers. Sometimes it just shows up as Yibrodor. Other people think that we have to turn 90 degrees again to the bottom, and we see with this one, it's once again like rotated at the bottom rather than mirrored at the bottom like it was on the front panel. Or wait, yeah, it was that the front panel? Let me see. I need to see again. Yeah, it's rotated. It's mirrored on the front panel rather than rotated. So it rotates 90 degrees, but then it rotates back 90 degrees, but is mirrored runes. On the back, we saw it was rotated, and here on the left side, it's also rotated. So some people think we have to rotate and see this A here and read this as Yibrodora, and that could also be true. In fact, it makes more sense because usually when you put a number and then a plural, you're going to put the plural word into the genitive. And I'm pretty sure the genitive needs to be yebrodra, or yebrodora, and not just yebrodra. Yebrodra would be the that's acceptable for a nominative plural, but and accusative plural, but probably not. Definitely not a genitive plural. It needs an a there. Yeah. So Twein Yebrodra, 2 brothers. So Romulus and Remus, 2 brothers. And then we have to be rotated again. I wonder if now I can't rotate. I can't rotate the image, so we have to read it upside down. You know what? I should have downloaded the image and then rotated it myself. It's not too late to do that. I don't think it's too late to do that. We have time. We definitely have time. So I'm going to save the image. And then I'm going to rotate it on my computer and see if I could share that screen. There we go. Okay, now I just have to share it. Add source. Window capture. Okay. Photo. Okay. And bring photo to the front. Okay, there we go. Now you see I've rotated it. And let's read. So we have the a from Yebrodra. And then we have the edel again. So it's födde, födda, or it's födda. In standard website, it's födda. Is double D, and then we have an ash here. So it's fed, probably fed. And then we have, yeah, this is the past of fedan, which is to feed, is fede. And then we have an H here, and then an I, and then another ash. Here. And what we might be noticing, like we did a couple weeks ago, although if you forgot, I would not blame you. A lot of places where standard Old English would have, and just later Old English in general would have an E at the end of a word, there's an A here. And this is harkening back to the older ending of what it used to be. But what happens in Old English is that A at the end of a word and E at the end of a word, if they're short, will just reduce to A in either case. And so that's why we have so many endings in Old English that are just the letter E. They're just A. Because A and E end up merging at the end of a word. So we have feda here. So this would be fede here in Old English, here. And then we have a win here. It's hard to see, but this is a win. It's the W. And then we have a yr rune here. It's like a U with a line inside of it. And we have L, and then we have an I, and then we have, again, it's hard to see, but it looks like it's an F here. So it's wulif. Ir is like the U sound. It's spelled with a Y in Old English usually. So it's wulif. And wulif is kind of strange to have an I there. It seems to be the word wolf in later Old English, wolf, which is the feminine form of wolf. There's a wolf and there's a wolf. And wolf is she-wolf. So referring back to the she-wolf, the racism. So we have Romulus and Remus, 2 brothers, fed them, here meaning them, wolf. And we could tell it's the subject because there's no other vowel that comes after it that's part of the word. There is another word after it, but it's not connected to wolf because it's in is the next word. So wolf is the subject of fedda. So a she-wolf fed them, is what this is. Fed them a she-wolf. In Rome This is probably, yeah, because we're in the north, it's Roma. Or no, it's the Roma. That's an ash. Roma Castri. That's an I. Roma Castri. Roma Chester in West Saxon, probably Roma Chester. So in Rome, but they're calling it Rome Chester, which is kind of fun. And then you rotate 90 degrees again for you it's this way, but for me it's this way. And then we have an O here, which is interesting. Ofla. And then we have unneg. 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 And now ofla is interesting, because usually this word is edla, but maybe they are pronouncing it more like an and they're forgetting to use edel here, or maybe they just have a variant that does not have the fronting, which is possible because there are different variants in Proto-Germanic between like olfila and olfala, like with an I versus with an A. The version with an I would cause the umlaut. The version with the A would not. So they might be retaining another variant here, and it's olfla. Either way, it means sort of like their estate, their native land, that kind of thing. And then we have unnech. Now unnech is probably just an early variant before breaking of unnach, which is unnear. Nach is near, so it's not near or far from their home. So far from home. So we can go over the whole thing again. I'm going to close the photo that's flipped. We'll go back to the unflipped version. So we've got Romulus and Remus, two brothers. A she-wolf fed them in Rome, far from their home, because they're not actually in Rome proper. They're sort of in the wilderness. But also Rome isn't supposed to exist. Rome proper isn't supposed to exist yet anyway. So this is all in retrospect. One thing I will say about the carving is I really like the trees and how they have the roots that are visible. It's kind of cool. Unless these are supposed to be sort of just representing the bark. But either way, it looks really cool. And I love the way that the leaves and stuff kind of fill the space. You probably noticed stylistically that the carvers are leaving a lot of the space filled. They want to keep as much of it there as possible. Partially stylistically, it looks nicer. You'll notice they just kind of put blocks and dots to fill space in the text as well. But I think also it's less that you have to carve out. I'm not saying that they were lazy. They clearly were not, with how many intricate patterns they put. You can see the interlace around the outside. But just it is, the more whalebone you can leave on it, the less you have to carve out, But they certainly didn't choose the easy route of doing that, because they made very intricate patterns here, kind of making the most of the whalebone. So just chiseling the majority of it out to leave some bare trees and a few figures. I think it's really well done. So let's move to the right panel. Now the right panel is probably one of the most mysterious ones that we could talk about. I don't know what my opinion on it is, honestly, still. And there's no consensus here. So let's talk about the carving first. We see some figures. This almost looks like a giraffe to me, but it clearly can't be. Or a person with a horse's head or horse mask or something. Something's going on, because this looked like people's legs, but it could just be a stylistic horse somehow. And we see someone in a helmet facing this figure. Again, we have a lot of leaves and stuff everywhere. Someone with a shield, someone armed. Then we have another horse here. We have some interlaced patterns surrounding the horse. I don't quite know what this is. If these are broken letters or if this is like someone in a cradle, I don't know. But there's someone looking slightly down, or at least towards the horse here, holding a stick. I think they're holding a stick. And then over here we have some more figures. We have 3 figures facing each other. The way that they're facing, where we have 2 hooded figures looking at each other, and then we have 1 figure in the middle, it almost reminds me of the cuculati, the hooded sort of the hooded motif that you see throughout like Roman Britain and continental. I think there are some continental examples of the cuculati as well, but they kind of do look like the cuculati, the 3 hooded figures that are part of sort of like, or might be related to the cult of the matrons. So these could be like mother figures or something, but I really don't know, and there are a lot of wild theories about what it could be, and the inscription does not help much. What we can read for sure is we have here R-I-S-C-I, risi, which looks like rixe, more standard, so it's like rushes. Maybe that's what these plants are. And we have bita, which is bitter. Okay. And then we have wudu down here, which is wood. Okay. Not super helpful, but something. What's going on with the inscription is that there is a some kind of cipher being used for the vowels. Some of the vowels are like as they should be, but for the most part the vowels are replaced not by their typical runes that are used, but just completely made up ones. So for example here, this might look like the runic N to people who are like following the rune stuff that I've been doing and like, or just can read runes. This might look like an N, but what we've noticed from the other inscriptions is it ends face forward, like a forward slash. The positive slope was like a negative slope of the thing that goes through the N. So this is an N. This is not an N because it's sloping backwards, and it has a thing going up. And what that reminds me of is the younger Futhark rune for like but that's not what this is. This is probably an A. Because this word is probably hair. Now, for the most part, the cipher for the vowels has been deciphered for the most part. People are pretty certain what the new symbols are, what they represent. Although there's some confusion about what's an A and what's an A, because they almost seem to be interchanged or confused here. It's unclear. But there are 2 different symbols for them. And then the O is very hard to, it makes it very hard to read because it looks a lot like just more lines. So this here is an O. So we have like a line and then a second line that goes to the bottom. So we have a line that doesn't go to the bottom, we have a line that goes to the bottom, and then we have a line slanting through both of them. It makes it look kind of like an H, although we know what H's look like. There's like the 2 vertical lines with the 2 negatively sloped lines connecting them. But here we have a positive slope line going through this one, and this is an O. And this over here is like a very squished one as well. Line going to the bottom, line going to the top, line intersecting them with a positive slope. And we're pretty sure that's an O. So this would be head holes. And then this zigzag here, it kind of reminds me of the Elder Futhark S, but we have an S here. This zigzag line is pretty confidently an I, so it's sit. And then we have this that looks a lot like a K, which is annoying that it looks so much like a K. But it's a vertical line that splits off at the bottom. It's more like an upside down Y, kind of. And we're pretty sure this is A. Although it's really hard to distinguish sometimes from the A that they use, because the A also looks like a K, but in a different way, and we'll see how. So this is probably sitath, which in later would be siteth. So head, horse, siteth. Here, horse sits. We don't know who horse is. Some people think there might be like a R that's missing here, or like they just dropped the R. and so that's like her horse sitteth. Here sits a horse. But we're not sure about that either. Some people think her could be the front, and os it could be her os. Her being like a sanctuary, and os being like the word for God. So sanctuary god or temple god. Some people think it could be referring to Woden. It's unclear, but I think this is head, just because we've had another panel that started with head. At least one other panel that started with head. And so I think, and just if you read a lot of Old English literature, you come to find that when they start things, they like to start with head. When I journal in Old English, I usually start with head as well. Here, like in this place or at this time, it's just setting, laying down context. So head, horse, sitteth. Here, a horse sits. Now, I think it could be here a horse sits just because it looks like there's a horse sitting down. But that's just my brain finding a funny way of reading this. I don't know if that's what it actually means. And we have another O, weird O. That's not our normal O. It's like a weird H-looking thing. Her hos sitteth on. There's a real N slanting forward. And we have H. We have what might be an ash again. And then we have an R. Or at least what looks like an R, but I'll come back to this R, because you'll notice this R looks kind of different from this R and the R's that we've seen, because the R's that we've seen often don't quite fully attach here. See, it kind of bends in to make it clear that it's an R, not a U, but it doesn't attach. This R very clearly attaches and it has a very sharp turn, and I will come back to that. But we're gonna operate under this being an R for now. So we have harm, and we have the E again, berg, we have G, and we have another ash, berga. So harmberga, it's probably something like harmberg. That's like harmberga, like a harm hill, harm mountain. So here a horse, or here horse, whoever horse is, it might be the horse, might not, sits on a harm mountain. And then we have a broken one, but it looks like it would have attached here. And this is not a K, like a C sound that we're used to. And the way we could tell is that it has a very sharp angle here, which the K does not usually have. The chain does not usually do that. So what this is, we think, is probably ah, which is very similar to the ah here, but it's got a sharp angle here. Almost looks like an H, like a lowercase h. So it's ah, and there's G, and then there's agl. Agl might be like terror, fear. Okay, well that kind of goes with harm mountain, fear. And then we turn 90 degrees again. And we've got D. This looks like a D. It's very damaged, but it looks like a D. R. The zigzag thing that's an I again. G. Another zigzag that looks like an I. And then a thorn. Drigith. So it's drigith. And we have an S. What looks like a win. And then what looks like it's going to be that split off into the bottom. Ah. Again. So, swa. So, what could be going on? Agl, drigith, swa. Sorry, I'm considering something that I hadn't thought of before. I think I got another idea of what this could be, like what this panel could be. Although I'm not sure about it. I don't know if I'm right. Whoops. I think I just got another crazy theory. I don't think I'm going to subject you to it because it's weird. I think I am not. I was trying to decide if I wanted to go into my theories about this. I don't have a definitive thing that I think this definitely is, but yeah, no. Yeah. All right. I'm not gonna waste any more time. Although we have plenty of time. Okay, so we have drith swa, and I think it goes. I think we should like pause after berga, and then agl drith swa is like a new line, or it's like a new sentence. That was a slip. I said line because I'm gonna reveal something about this in a second. You probably guessed though. I'll drith swa, and then we have we're gonna turn 90 degrees again. Am I gonna download again? Yeah, I'll download it again and flip it over. I think that helped to do. So I'm gonna do it again. Let me share the image. Oh, it's already sharing it. Okay, cool. I guess it remembered that I had a window, image window. Okay, so let's go back to the photo. Okay. Yes, okay, it's what's showing. All right, so you have Hiri, H-I-R-I, Hiri, and then we have this very sharp, no, that R does not connect. Hiri, and then we have the E again, Erta. We have this sort of H-looking A here, although it might also be A. Like, we might be wrong to think that the split at the bottom and the H are separate, but I'm assuming that they're separate. Erta, don't know who that is, but Erta. And we have another E. Eis. Oh no, we have Erta E. There's another E. And then we have Yis, G-I-S, because it's a zigzag again. Yis. We have a G-R, another H-looking A that's been broken. Yisgraf, and this is an F that's been broken. Yisgraf. Yisgraf. So, Hiri, this is probably an older version of Hire, her. And we have Ertai, who are the Ertai. That sounds like a Latin plural of something, but it says Ertai. No idea who that is. And then Yisgraf. So it needs to be one person here, even though it sounds like a Latin plural, because Yisgraf is singular. And Yisgraf is like charged or put her into place, I guess, because it's skraf is like skrivan is the verb, and it's comes from the Latin word for to write, but it usually means like to consign someone to something, like you've appointed them in a certain situation, usually like legal of some kind. And the agl drith swa, agl, if agl is like terror, grief, and then drith is the verb, probably the verb. The best guess I have is dreugan, although the vowel is weird for it. If it's like drieth, maybe drieth, but it's being reduced to this drieth. I would expect that for later Old English, so not early Old English. But that would be like endure or suffer. So it's like endures terror as Erta consigned her, or because Ertai consigned her to it, maybe. Don't know who Hira is either. Who is her and who is Ertai? Gisgraf Sarden. We have S. Well, this could be A, but it could also be A, and like the angle's been worn out. And this is another reason why we're not sure if they're even distinguished here. But yeah, it could be Sarden or Sarden. It looks more like the splitting one, so I'm going to say Sarden. But this is very vertical compared to the split one. I don't know, it's hard to tell. Sarden. But I would read it normalizedly as Sarden. Sar is sorrow. That's where we get the word sore from. And then den, it's probably what it sounds like. Den usually has two N's, but often double letters are not written in runes especially. And even manuscripts, they're dropped a lot of the time at the end of a word. Sarden, a den of sorrow. Okay, maybe that's what she's considered, den of sorrow. Serga. I think that's, oh no, that's an O. Sorry, that's hard to tell if it's the backslash with the slash through it, but I think that's two vertical lines with the slash going through it. So it's sor. Sorga on, why can't I move? Okay. Sorga A. That's clearly the A one with the H looking thing. Now I have to turn 90 degrees again. ND. So it's sorga and, so sorrow or pain, and then we have the E. Seva. Oh, seva. Okay, this one's fun. So it's an F, but on the same vertical line that the F is written on, we have a typical A. But written on the same line. They're just stacked on top of each other. It's not the cipher A, it's the normal A that sort of bends up. It's like a bent one, like you're going to write an O, but then you just go down with the second line. So it's sorga. Maybe I can rotate it one more time, actually. Yeah. No. Other way. There we go. And seva. You can kind of see that better now, I think. Seva. I think that's a... I think it's a T. Can't tell if it's an L or a T, but I think it's a T that's been worn on this side. I think an L would go further down, yeah. T, another weird O. R, N, and then we have the A, again, the split at the bottom, upside down Y. So, seva torna. And torna, I think it's plural, torn, which is like torture, torment, woe. So you have like sorrow and woe, and then seva. And seva is like the mind, the heart, which are the same thing. The mind, like your thoughts and stuff, are located in your heart. So seva usually means mind / heart. It's sort of where your soul is, the like sort of cognizant thinking part of your soul that is feeling things. That's the seva. Seva has a lot of names. Heder, breast, mold, mood. It's called the mold or mod seva a lot of the time. So that is what it says. Very unclear what is happening. Something bad, clearly. Something distressing. We're going to go back to the image I have on my browser. So yeah. Something distressing is going on to someone who is at least grammatically gendered feminine. Erta is doing it. Not sure why. Unless agl is doing it to both. It's weird though. The verb doesn't match. I don't think. We also have a present and a past in the same sentence if they are connected. Now, earlier I said something about them being lines. And the reason for that is that we can clearly see alliteration here. If we go over it again, her hos sitath on Harmberg. Okay, so that's an alliterative line. Her hos sitath. Her hos sitath on Harmberg. The sitath after hos is a little bit wonky, but it's not unheard of. If I were trying to style this as a poet myself, I would have put the sitath first. I would have said her sitath hos, just so that the h's are separated and like where the two stresses are clear. You don't have like an extra whole word that's a verb with two syllables sitting after the main stress. I would have put the verb between them just to show that it's not stressed. Her sitath hos sitath on Harmberg. It's probably a compound, but compounds are allowed to take up two stresses technically, and this is like a falling stress. So harm being the third h, the third alliterative stress, and then berga is the last one, and it can't alliterate. And then we can look again. Agl drieth swa hire ertai yesgraf. So we have vowel alliteration here. We have agl alliterating with ertai, whoever that is. And then we have our third one, which is, where does it start again? Skraf. Oh yeah, Sarden. Sarden sorga on seva torna. So we have three S's there, alliterating with each other, and that fits stress-wise as well. So it alliterates. So these could be alliterative lines, maybe from some epic that we've lost, some poem, some oral poem that was passed down that maybe explained what the heck was going on here, but we don't know. Some people have tried to find parallels with this in other poems, like in parts of the Nibelungenlied or in Volsunga Saga. Some people looked at biblical stuff or the death of Balder. Like, people have looked everywhere to try to find parallels with this, and nothing perfectly fits as far as we can tell. Now, I'm going to return to the whole pointy R thing. So reading this as an R, I think makes sense, at least grammatical sense in a lot of these sentences, if you can call them sentences. It gives you words that make sense, at least, even if the situation is unclear. At least the words are identifiable for the most part, except for ertai. So could just be described being inconsistent and writing the R's differently than they usually do. But I think it's someone, oh gosh, what's his name? It starts with a D. There is another scholar, I can't remember his name. It's going to kill me. Can I find it? Maybe I should look it up. It does not start with a D. It's Bredehoft. Bredehoft. That's what his name is. Yeah, so Bredehoft thinks that these R's, these weird R's, are actually U, like the letter U. And one reason that kind of could make sense is because we don't actually see any normal U in the inscription on the sort of border. We don't say U. We don't say ur anywhere. Just by happenstance, none of these words needed a U. The only U's we see are inside the image where it says wudu, but these are clearly using the typical vowels in general. Riski, bita, wudu. They're just using the normal vowels. They're not using the cipher inside of the image. The cipher is only being used on the outside. And so if this is a cipher, what's the cipher symbol for U? Maybe it's this weird looking R that doesn't look like the normal R's that they typically use that aren't connected all the way. So these R's are connected and pointier. And so Bredehoft says that these are actually U's, and so we should read them as U's. So then let's do that. Let's read them as U's. There are only 3, I think, in the... yeah, there are only 3. that could count as the weird U. So we have, I guess, the weird R that is a U. So we have her, hos. Oh man, I shouldn't have closed the image. Let me reopen the image. I think it's still going to be rotated. Yeah, it's still rotated. Okay, I'm going to unrotate that so that I can re-rotate it later. Okay, and I'll zoom in. So we have her hos sitath on Haumberga. Haumberga. Agl drieth swa. Agl drieth. Why does it rotate that way? It's so annoying. Agl drieth swa. Hiri eutai geskraf. Okay. Sau den sorge and it can only rotate to the left clockwise instead of counterclockwise, which is really annoying. And seva torna. That's a regular R. Clearly, it barely connects at all. So the different words here are instead of harmberga, we have haumberga, which could be a form of like dative, like a high, and it could be dative if it's berg. Yeah, I was just checking the gender of berg in my mind for a second. Yeah, it works. Haumberga. So a high mountain, high hill. Instead of a harm hill, it's a high hill. So here a hos sits on a high hill. Okay, whoops. What the heck? Oh, I just moved to a different image. That's what happened. Okay. And terror or grief endures someone while or as or because her euta. And euta could be an understandable word. It could be the word euta, which is one of the Jutes, the Germanic tribe. It could be a Jute. Euta. Euta geskraf as the Jute or a Jute consigned her or appointed it to her. A sow or sow den, a den of sow. I think this is the one that doesn't really track for me. I don't have any idea what a sow den would be. I can't even come up with an idea. Maybe I'm just uncreative or forgetting a word or something, but I can't think of anything that sow den would mean. Sow den, sorge and seva torna. I don't think this reading makes it much better. All it offers us, the other interpretation of R did not, is a potential understanding of this word. This erta or euta gives us a possible idea of what that could be. It also, I guess, makes sense that there would be a cipher for U even if it didn't show up. But if it didn't show up, then we wouldn't know what it was. We don't need it needn't to be here. Like, as we can see, like, it's just very possible that there's no U in any of these words. That's fine. It is odd how consistently the scribe does not connect R, except in these very pronounced places where I'm like, why is he doing it this way? But that's kind of circular in a way because it's only consistent. It's only consistently R except for these places if you don't count these as R's. If you count these as R's, all you need to say is that the scribe is not always doing R the same way. Now, it's difficult to prove. Scribes can often be inconsistent with their spelling, but their hands can be pretty similar. Like, the letters might look slightly different, but like you can tell sort of the way that they are written. Like studying their handwriting is very doable, and I do kind of respect the idea that like the scribe does his R's in a particular way, and even if it looks slightly different, like here, like to me, this looks like it's the same sort of way that the scribe is writing an R up here, and he just did it at a slightly different angle, but it's still the same R, right? It's still an R that is not completely connected. And he's just going at a slightly bigger angle. Like, the angles of the scribe's N's differ in places. Oh, the N is over here. Like, the N in... I keep going to the next image. Okay. The N in the word and here is way less slanted forward than it is in other places. But it clearly is slightly slanted forward in the same way that the scribe tends to do it. And the scribe also tends to do the vertical N and then the horizontal N, just because the sort of sloped down thing of the N comes after. It's like you can tell the order that the scribe is doing it in. So these R's, while they're different, it still seems like the same hand. Like there's the carver is still carving the same letter, just at in a different way. Now, this one, I will admit, looks very different. This R, I think, is the most dramatically different of all the three R's that are potentially used. This one, yeah, it really looks different to me. It's not just connecting. It's like the scribe is lifting. I'm saying lifting. I'm talking as if the scribe is writing this with a pen. But like the carver is actually making like a line where these meet, that it's breaking it. In all the other places, the line on the R is sort of like an unbroken chain, even down at the bottom where we were just looking, even here where it's more sharp as well. It's like it's a line that does not break or separate. Here, it really does look like it's split off. Like there's a line that comes down and connects with the vertical line, and then there's a separate line that comes off. And maybe there's a little bit of overlap here, but you can see the line. It looks very separate as opposed to this R, right? This is a dramatically different R from this one. Much more like two vertical lines that you can just kind of see. It barely bends in to make it an R and not an older form of a U that we usually don't see in Old English anyway. Usually the U's look more V-ish, upside down V. Yeah, and even this one, you can see it's all connected. This one has more of a break. This one I can see is a lot more like this one, where it like breaks off separately. And even looking at the other panels, like I'm going to go intentionally to the other image now and look at some of these R's. Oh, this is still flipped. Like here, the R is combined. It's one strand. Here, same here. Here, there's another R. Well, that R you can't tell because it's broken. There's a Rome chest right here. Yeah, a Rome here. This R, again, it's always connected. So if I wanted to like study this carver's, I want to say handwriting, hand carving of letters, then yeah, that R does not fit the type. Like it almost is like as if another person carved that one or something. Let me put my chisel down and could you add an R there, friend, while I get a drink of water? I don't know. It almost looks like someone else wrote this R, or it's not an R and it's the same scribe doing a different letter. I can kind of respect that interpretation just because of how different these R's are from the other ones. Although with this one, I could see this as like it was connected but broke over time, right? It's very possible that happened. Here, I don't see that. I definitely see more of a break here, intentional break. But even consistent handwriters sometimes they'll do a weird letter every once in a while. Like on my notes here, I did a T that does not look like my normal T's here at one point, just because I wasn't paying attention and my T came out differently. That could have happened here. Although it's a lot harder for it to unintentionally happen when you're carving into bone as opposed to writing on paper quickly. This was not done quickly. This was done with some care and some time. But it is interesting to me. Although I think if I want to put my overall opinion down, I'm going to say these are R's. I think it just reads better with R's. I'm going to be okay with not knowing who Erta is, because I think it's an R anyway. I really think that's an R. That's my opinion. So, if you wanted my opinion, that's my opinion. Okay, I'm going to go back to the browser. So, what could this be? There are a lot of ideas. If you want to see some theories, I think the Wikipedia article lists some theories that people have had, and explains why, some connections people have made. I'm not convinced of any of them personally. I don't think they're wrong. I don't have enough for me to decide which one I think I lean towards, or if I could see it being some completely lost story that we have no other sort of like connection to. But I do want to say these really remind me of the Cuculati, or if not the Cuculati, just like matron images in general, like the 3 hooded figures. That really feels like matrons to me, just from the other art from this area and time period that I've seen. It really reminds me of the matrons or the Cuculati specifically. So whatever story was here, it might have been related to the Cuculati, which would be really fun, I think, because we don't know a lot about these guys, gals, depending, but we don't really know a lot about these figures. We have some ideas, there's some inscriptions, some relics as well, lots of statues, but it would be cool if there were actually some kind of old English epic that involved them or something, or some old English poem that involved them. That would be really cool, and this might be some kind of remnant of that we've lost, unfortunately. So yeah, this is the right panel. It's the most mysterious one. It's really cool, and we don't know what it's about. So if you want to look at some of the theories, those are on Wikipedia. I'm not just going to regurgitate what Wikipedia says. And we never talked about this extensively in any of my Germanic philology classes, so it's not something that I've had intense discussions or theories about. So yeah, I think it's something that's worth exploring though, but not today, because I would like to talk about the lid. This is the inscription on the lid. Actually, if we go back, you can kind of see that the lid is not complete. It's kind of broken here. But what we do see on it is this. We see this carving on it. Now, this carving is interesting because unlike the other ones, there's not like a sort of like border of text. Maybe there was, but it was broken. But no, what we do see though is some kind of stronghold or something. I really like the design they use for the like sort of zigzagging bricks, or whatever this is. I like the design a lot. And then we see soldiers on the outside holding, shields and spears and swords and stuff. We see arrows coming down, it looks like, into the shields. We see people, someone looks like they might have fallen or been slain. This looks like a wheel. This might have been where like a knob was to lift the lid. That's what I imagine. And then we see a figure here with a bow and arrow. And there's someone inside here as well. I really love the interlace on these columns. And then it says, Agili. Ash Yevu Is Lau Is. Agili. Whomst is this? So, you might remember on the front panel, there was this figure that might have been Agil, Waylon's brother. Some people think this might also be Agil. This says Agil with an I at the end. Maybe in the dative case. Don't know why he'd be in the dative case. To Agil, for Agil, maybe. I don't know. By Agil, maybe it's instrumental. Maybe it's through Agil or something, like by means of Agil. Maybe. Especially if we're trying to establish Agil. If this is Agil and he's a hunter, then him having an arrow, I guess, would make sense. But the scene does not seem to reflect clearly anything in any stories involving Agil, maybe. What I see here with the stronghold and the army on the outside, it looks very Trojan War-y to me. Maybe I'm biased by being able to know the controversy around this word, but even without that, the stronghold with the battle raging outside of the stronghold and the style that they've chosen to use to represent it does not look like Old English architecture at all. It looks very like I'm trying to represent something foreign to an Old English audience. I get the vibe that this is some kind of, I don't know, I'm getting Trojan War vibes, just especially with like all the shields and spears and swords and stuff. Yes, they've given them period armor, but that's normal for medieval art. Like armor of the period that they are carving in and not the period that they're depicting. It's pretty typical. And the other theory as to what this can be, if it's not Egil, the main other theory, there are a few different theories, but the other main theory is that this is some altered Old English form of the name Achilles, where Achilles has gone through some kind of change that has led it to be pronounced Egil instead of, I don't know, Akil or something like that. And I think that's very plausible, especially if this word was borrowed into like an early form of Germanic, like not Old English, but it was borrowed from Latin or Greek into, say, like Proto-Germanic or Proto-West Germanic, because what we see is an ash here. So it's either undergone umlaut from the I, or it's undergone like Anglo-Frisian brightening, which it can only have done if it was loaned before that happened, most likely at least. And that would explain why the consonant is so different. It's not like a k, but it's a g, like a agil, agili. And if it's a loaned name, like from the Greek Achilles, then this E being here makes a little bit more sense because it's like a foreign word. And this would be like an I stem noun in Old English with an E, probably at the later stage in Old English. It would be like agile or something like that, agile. So I think it could be Achilles, and I think I lean towards that just because of the scenery. It makes me feel a lot more like I'm looking at a depiction of the Trojan War than it does Egil, the brother of Wayland. I don't see that as well here. This also looks like the Sagittarius symbol to me, which might lean Egil words if it's representing a hunter, but also just any kind of archer could be the Sagittarius symbol. I don't know if this is meant to be the Sagittarius symbol. It's probably just another arrow, but it looks a lot like the Sagittarius symbol to me, just reversed. And they're protecting someone in here, so there's some kind of figure that they're protecting. Now, the thing that doesn't make sense is why would Achilles be inside of Troy? I don't know. Like, why is he inside the fortress and not outside? Maybe it's him getting in. But why is he pointing towards the others? I don't know. So I don't think the Achilles read is perfect because it's logistically weird. But the scene, I guess, makes a little bit more sense as some kind of classical war to me than it does. Yeah, and also these look like they're representing like Roman battle kilts or something like that. Not like, I don't know. It does not look like typical Germanic warrior band attire to me. Even though they're like supposed to be Germanic depictions. I just don't get Egil. I don't get Egil from here. But it's unclear what's going on here, and there's no inscription to help us either. Maybe if we had an inscription, we'd be swayed one way or another. But that is the lid. And with that, that's actually the whole Frank's casket. We've talked about all of it. There's probably a knob here, and maybe there's a knob here. Or maybe this was like the lock, and this was the knob up here at the top. But yeah, you can see the lid up here as well in this picture. So that is the Frank's casket. And we're finishing like 20 minutes earlier than I expected. Or than the typical plan. I kind of expected to finish early just because there's a lot of mystery with this that we can't get into all of it today. But I think it's a very beautiful casket, I must say. It's a very intricately designed with all these interlaced motifs and the little animals in the corners I really love as well. I love the little maybe duck or goose that's here at the nativity scene. I really love the building design. I love the sort of plants motifs that are all over this one, this mysterious one. And we see animals here too, in the corners, of some of the corners at least. So, that is Frank's casket. I hope that was fun for people to see. I am very glad I decided to do this because it's a very fun artifact. And I would like to look at other things like this at some point soon. I would like to look at other sort of runic artifacts. We've looked at rune stones before. We looked at rune poems before. I want to look at more rune artifacts and stuff because they're really cool to talk about. Especially early Old English ones, because we don't have a ton of them. But it's some of the earliest Old English we have written, which is really cool. And this casket, like, if we think, like, it's interesting to think about the whole thing together. Like, we have a front that has, like, both Christian imagery and, like, heathen imagery. We have the top that might be the Trojan War, it might be more heathen stuff. We have the mysterious right panel, which we don't know what it's depicting, but it might be some story about the Cuculati or something, or connected to some other Germanic story. And then we have the left panel, which has the story of Romulus and Remus. So it kind of is a really interesting testament to just how much influence, just how many different influences were coming in at this early period of Old English history. Like, this is the 700s, not long after the Germanic tribes came to the British Isles. It's just been like a couple centuries now since that process began. And this is very recently after the initial conversion of their early English to Christianity. So there's still a lot of, Germanic tradition stories that are still influencing heavily. Germanic heathenry is probably still something they're aware of, clearly, with their stories, but also because it was a very recent conversion. But you also have all these Roman influences, like classical influences, Roman influences, both from like continental contact with them, but also because of like the remnants that were probably present from Roman Britain a few centuries earlier. So it's really interesting just how many things are coming together on one early English artifact. I think that's really cool. So that is all for today. Next week we will be doing conlanging. So I'm excited for that. I've worked a little bit on the conlang on my own time, as I said I would, but I will walk you through sort of what my decisions were, and we'll keep working on the grammar. I'm excited to get into verb conjugation. I'm very excited to get into verb conjugation. We mostly hammered out noun declension last time, so that was cool. But yeah, we'll talk about pronouns, and then we'll talk about verb conjugation this week, and then we'll probably figure out some other stuff. We'll see how long that takes, though. So that's the conlang with me that we're doing this coming Saturday, May 6th. Back to the usual schedule. And then the following week we'll do some Egyptian hieroglyphs, and I will announce what those are next week. Or I guess, again, May 6th, I will announce that in my typical sort of overview of what's going on before we get into the conlang. All right. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions about Frank's casket that you want me to answer, go ahead and leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, or find another way to contact me if you have my contact. That's on Twitch. There's that. Check out the commissions page if you're interested in some poetry. And I reminded that I do also have a Patreon. And I wanted to shout out, I have a patron. FishyLawnGnome is an Iridian level patron. So thank you to FishyLawnGnome for supporting this stream. Thank you very much. All right, now I will be ending the stream for today. Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a great rest of whatever time zone you're in. Farewell.